15-year-old Tina Gray has a nightmare about a burnt man wearing a glove with knives attached to his fingers attacks her in a boiler room named Freddy Krueger. She wakes up screaming and notices claw marks on her nightgown.
Later.
Tina's best friend Nancy Thompson and Nancy's boyfriend Glenn Lance reveal that they also had a nightmare the previous night. They'll end up having a slumber party where she discovers that Nancy also had a nightmare about the mysterious burnt man. Tina's boyfriend Rod crashes the party and forces them to sleep in separate rooms. Then Tina has a nightmare again, but this time she dies. Tina's boyfriend Rod wakes up, forcing him to flee as Nancy and Glenn awaken to find Tina dead. Nancy's father Don, who also happens to be a police officer, arrests Rod. At school, Nancy falls asleep in class and dreams that the burnt man chases her into the boiler room, where she is cornered. She then intentionally burns her arm on a pipe to wake her from the nightmare. She freaks the class out with her screaming, then she notices a burn mark on her arm. Nancy visits Rod at the police station, describing Tina's death and his recent nightmares about the same man stalking her in her dreams, making Nancy believe that the burnt man killed Tina. At home, Nancy falls asleep in the bathtub and is nearly drowned by the man. Nancy then depends on caffeine to stay awake and invites Glenn over to watch her as she sleeps. In her dream, Nancy sees the man prepare to kill Rod in his cell, but then he turns his attention toward her. Nancy runs away and wakes up when her alarm clock goes off. The man kills Rod by staging it like another day in the life of Jeffrey Epstein. At Rod's funeral, Nancy's parents become worried when she describes her dreams. Her mother, Marge, takes her to a sleep disorders clinic. In her dream, she grabs Freddy's hat and takes it out of her dream. Her mother barricades the house and tells Nancy that Freddy was a child murderer who killed 20 children. He got released, then the parents of the children burned him alive. Nancy now realizes that Freddy is after her because of what her mom did. Nancy tries to call Glenn, but his father won't allow it. Because of this, Glenn falls asleep with the TV on his bed for some reason and fucking dies. Nancy puts her mother to sleep and asks her father to break into the house in 20 minutes. Nancy home loans her house by rigging booby traps around the house. Nancy falls asleep and puts Freddy in her dream and makes him go through hell because of all the gay sex. She locks him in the basement and shouts out the window for help. The police arrive to find that Freddy has escaped from the basement. Nancy sees burning footsteps leading up to her mother's room where Freddy is choking her to death. After her father puts the fire out, some weird shit happens on the bed. When Nancy's alone in the room, Freddy appears behind her and she defeats him by saying,
"Hey, I'm not afraid anymore."
Freddy falls over and fucking dies. Nancy walks outside and everybody is still alive. She gets into Glenn's convertible and it's Mommy? Three girls are then seen playing jump rope singing Freddy's nursery rhyme as Marge gets pulled through the front door window. A Nightmare on Elm Street was inspired after the director, Wes Craven, read an article in the LA Times when he was a child about Hmong refugees fleeing from Cambodia and Vietnam to America because Pol Pot and Khmer Rouge's regime of war and genocide. They suffered a fuck ton of nightmares, to the point where they refused to sleep. After listening to the doctor, they went to bed and died after their second dream. Medical experts at the time called this phenomenon Asian death syndrome. The ages that were affected varied from 19 to 57. No one was safe. Almost like there was a killer among us. The LA Times has never made a connection to these types of cases, so it was always a mystery. Inspiration for Freddy Krueger came when he remembered when he saw an old man walking outside one night when he was younger. Kind of like in Home Alone, the man stared at him and then just walked away. The name Freddy Krueger came from his old bully Fred Krueger, but this isn't the first time that name was used in a movie. In 1972, The Last House on the Left, also directed by Wes Craven, the antagonist's name was Krug. Coincidentally, there was a Canadian serial killer named Peter Woodstock that got arrested in 1957 for murdering 3 children. Then in 1982, 2 years before Nightmare on Elm Street came out, he changed his name to David Michael Krueger. Freddy's iconic sweater came about when Wes Craven remembered that he got scared by a homeless man wearing a sweater with Christmas colors on it. Another reason for him choosing red and green was when he read an article in a 1982 Scientific American magazine where red and green were the 2 hardest colors to visually process in the retina. Freddy was supposed to be a child, but the decision changed when a lot of Catholic activities were happening around. Craven has stated that Freddy stands for the worst of parenthood and adulthood, the dirty old man, the nasty father, and the adult who wants children to die rather than help them prosper. He's the boogeyman and the worst fear of children, the adult that's out to get them. He's a very primal figure, sort of like Kronos devouring his children, that evil, twisted, perverted father figure who wants to destroy and is able to get them at their most vulnerable moment, which is when they're asleep. Wes Craven wanted to make Freddy Krueger different. He said, "A lot of killers were wearing masks. Leatherface, Michael Myers, Jason. I wanted my villain to have a mask, but be able to talk and taunt and threaten. So I thought of of him being burned and scarred. A knife was too basic, so I thought, how about a glove with steak knives? I gave the idea to our special effects guy Jim Doyle. 2 gloves were made, a real one that can cut stuff and a stunt glove that wouldn't be able to cut anything. Believe it or not, Freddy's original weapon was supposed to be a sickle, but after the 3rd or 4th draft, it got scrapped. In 1975, a song came out called Dreamweaver by Gary Wright, where Craven drew inspiration from the starting synthesizer to help inspire Freddy's theme song. After finishing production on Swamp Thing, he began writing the screenplay for A Nightmare on Elm Street. He pitched it to Walt Disney Studios, and they said, great idea, but fuck it. Tone down the violence, make it for kids. We're sensitive pussies. Unsurprisingly, Craven declined the offer and went to another studio, Paramount Pictures. This time, Paramount Pictures declined because they said it was way too similar to a movie called Dreamscape that they were producing at the time. Next, Universal Studios declined, and he framed the rejection letter on his office wall. The rejection letter was from December 14th, 1982, and it said, "We have reviewed the script you have submitted, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Unfortunately, the script did not receive an enthusiastic enough response for us to go forward at this time. However, when you have a finished print, please get in touch, and we will be delighted to screen it for a possible negative pickup." Then finally,
it's time for the moment you've been waiting for. Da, 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 da.
New Line Cinema agreed to produce the film. Before agreeing to produce, New Line Cinema only distributed films rather than making their own. A Nightmare on Elm Street was the very first commercial success from New Line, and it is ranked at 104 on New Line Cinema's top grossing movies, which makes sense because they also went on to create the Lord of the Rings franchise. But New Line is often considered the house that Freddy built. Filming began in California on June 11th, 1984 and lasted 32 days. The high school that was used to film the movie was John Marshall High School, which was also used to film Grease and Pretty in Pink. So while kids were having nightmares in the classroom, Molly Ringwald was partying out in the back, and John Travolta was flying a car on the football field. Charlie Sheen was supposed to play Glenn, but he said, "I don't see this guy wearing a funny hat with a rotted face and a striped sweater and a bunch of clacky fingers catching on." Boy, was he wrong. Over 500 gallons of fake blood were used for special effects. For Johnny Depp's death scene, they used a revolving room set that was also used for Tina's death. The cameraman and Craven used seats from a Datsun B210 to keep themselves grounded while the set rotated. The film crew inverted his bedroom and flipped the camera so everything looked right side up. Then they poured gallons of red water in the hole of the bed because using fake blood would make the geyser look off. But even using red water was still a bit because the water poured out at an unexpected angle and caused the rotating room to start spinning. A lot of the water spilled out of the window, covering Nancy and Wes Craven. In another take made for TV, a skeleton shoots out of the bed and hits the ceiling. The film crew made a sleeping place for Freddy in his boiler room, but it was never shown. They made his man cave look like he was actually rejected from society and living like an outcast because he had naked Barbie dolls lying everywhere. This was the place where he supposedly forged his glove and abducted and murdered the 20 children. In the scene where Freddy's hand goes in between Nancy's legs, the set was built on top of a swimming pool, which made the bathtub bottomless. The melting staircase scene in Nancy's nightmare was made by using pancake mix, and when Freddy stretches through the wall was made out of spandex. Rod was high on heroin during this scene, and this centipede was lost on set for a bit. When Nancy tries to stay awake, she watches The Evil Dead. Craven wanted to put a Sam Raimi Easter egg in his movie after Sam had featured a Hills Have Eyes poster Easter egg in The Evil Dead. Because of this little nod, Raimi put Krueger's glove in a work shed scene in Evil Dead 2 and Ash vs. The Evil Dead. Craven wanted the ending to be a lot more peaceful. The original plan was to have Nancy kill Freddy by ceasing to believe in him, then wake up and realize it was all a dream. Nancy gets up seeing her friends driving in the car, hops in and drives into the fog. New Line Cinema founder Robert Shea insisted on a twist ending. He wanted Freddy to kidnap the kids and drive the car away. 5 different endings were thought up, but once he heard Freddy pulling Marge into the door, he had to make that the ending. Even though he wanted to have a very peaceful ending, there was still a sinister side to everything. After the car drives away into the fog, he wanted the cameras to pan over to the girls playing jump rope and singing Freddy's theme song. Filming wrapped at the end of July and was rushed in post in order to get the movie out for its November release. The MPAA, or the Motion Picture Association of America film rating system, required a minimum of 13 seconds to be cut from the film to maintain an R rating. The scenes where Tina's bloody body hitting the bed, Glenn's body rising out of the bed after his death, and some dialogue scenes were cut due to timing. A Nightmare on Elm Street premiered on November 9th, 1984 with a limited theatrical release and advertising mostly relying on word of mouth, showing in only 165 theaters across the country, but thankfully it was a massive hit. With a budget of only $1.1 million, the film gained $1,271,000 on its opening weekend. The original budget was $700,000, but some Yugoslavian guy named George Zasevic, the founder of Smart Egg Pictures, wanted his girlfriend in movies, so he gave them $400,000. The film eventually earned $57 million worldwide and $25.5 million coming from just US and Canada alone. IMDb rated it a 7.4 out of 10, and Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 95% with an audience audience score of 84%. After rewatching, I would rate it a 6.5, purely based off of entertainment value. That's not counting if the acting was bad or any other shit. The Nightmare on Elm Street later went on to receive a few nominations and awards. It was nominated for Best Horror Film in 1985, which was overtaken by Gremlins. Best Performance by young actor Stu Garcia, who was overtaken by Noah Hathaway in The Neverending Story. And Best DVD Classic Film Release in 2007, which was bested by Godzilla from the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. Wes Craven won Avoriaz Fantastic Film Festival's Critic Award in 1985, and Heather Langenkamp, who played Nancy, won Special Mention for acting. Nightmare on Elm Street would go on to launch 8 other films, including a crossover with Jason from Friday the 13th, and books came out in 1987 written by Jeffrey Cooper that depicted what happened in the movie, and an 8-part comic book adaptation was supposed to be made, but it all fell through because Blackthorn Publishing went bankrupt. 3 issues were written and 1 was even drawn out, but nothing got published. 2 Bollywood versions of the film came out in 1989 and 1994 called Cooney Murda and Makal. An adult parody came out in 2011 called A Wet Dream on Elm Street, where Freddy uses vibrators on his gloves instead of knives. If you made it this far into the video, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Doing anything helps. Thank you for watching.